Just going to share my screen, colleagues. So hopefully you'll be able to see the slide now. Could you just give me a quick nod or a thumbs up, those of you with your cameras on, or just unmute quickly and let me know that you can see the slide? Wonderful. Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Susie. So absolutely delighted to be with you all for this morning's session. I have about 15-20 minutes with you now to talk you through some of the key elements of our organisation and what the National Literacy Trust might be able to do for your school, working in partnership with you in the future. So we're hoping that you will take away from this session an overview of our organisation, an understanding of the provision that we can provide schools with in terms of supporting literacy development, but also a sense of your own professional development and being able to use our website and get the most out of our website to secure your own understanding and your own practice and development over time. So hopefully that's something that you will achieve from attending this session with me this morning. So I want to start off just by drawing your attention to us as an organisation and positioning who we are for you. So some of you may not know very much about the National Literacy Trust as an organisation. We are a charitable trust in the United Kingdom. We pride ourselves on leading the national campaign to raise awareness of literacy issues across the country, and indeed we work internationally as well, and to try and find solutions to those issues. We work with policymakers to try and drive change and to improve public understanding. A lot of our work is about tackling that relationship between poverty and low levels of literacy, particularly where it's entrenched and intergenerational. And of course, what we're always trying to do is to identify practical solutions in communities to try and make change happen and make change happen in the most effective way. So as such, we work in a partnership way. We are strong believers in a place-based approach. So we have a number of hubs, literacy hubs, across the country in some of our poorest areas of the country. And we work alongside local and corporate business, with health organisations, with other charitable and voluntary organisations, with the prison service, with public libraries, to try and come together in partnership and improve literacy levels in all of these communities. But of course, much of our work and a key proportion of our work is directly with schools, with multi-academy trusts and with local educational authorities. And we work with both primary schools, with secondary schools and with early years settings as well. And I just want to draw your attention to the link on the screen there in blue on the first slide here. And if you actually tapped in and followed that link, it would take you to a very specific area of our website. And it is our pupil-facing secondary area, which we shorthand and call Zone In, as you can see on the link. And this area is absolutely for pupils to visit in their own time. And it has a wealth of materials that does not need sort of teacher intervention to manage those materials. Students can go there to source things connected with career development, career understanding, writing CVs, writing covering letters, looking at techniques for job interviews. We have interviews with authors, we have poetry workshops, we have competitions, we have all sorts of things that students can take advantage of to work on their own literacy skills and their own literacy development. Now, obviously, what I want to do today is talk you through the way that we provide support for schools. And we really have a three-part model that we're very proud of in terms of what we offer on our website, what we offer through our bespoke training, and what we offer through bespoke consultancy work with schools as well. Now, of course, our aim is to help schools to make systematic change happen and to think about how we can do that at a strategic level so that it becomes change that is sustained and manageable and planned for. And then we have the support materials around it, whether that be a particular programme, a 10-week intervention programme, for example, an ongoing series of CPD workshops and events, a conference, or just some very clear pedagogy tools for the classroom that teachers can download for themselves from our website. So the diagram here shows you how we aim to maintain that cycle of school improvement. And many of us, including myself, working with the National Literacy Trust, come from a background in school improvement. For many years, I worked with a local education authority as a literacy consultant and literacy advisor. I've also, of course, been a teacher in secondary schools. I was a head of English. I've also carried the leading literacy role in schools, and I've been a senior leader with responsibility for teaching and learning in schools. So many of us, as I said, have this background in whole school development and whole school improvement. And of course, what we're really trying to do is implement change and support schools to evaluate the impact of that work, so it actually becomes really, as I said, sustainable, worthwhile, and also I think it's about making those choices, isn't it, about what is it that is appropriate for our school context that will help us to really drive forward those priorities that we've identified for our own particular school. I just want to talk to you a little bit about our National Literacy Trust membership offer. Now, we think it's pretty reasonable. As a school, you would purchase membership with us at £100 for your whole school. This means that every single teacher, teaching assistant, person in your school community can log on and use our full website. So we have some elements of our website that are protected for members only. So some of our key resources, perhaps some of our online training that we make available to members, you would need membership to access those elements of our training. We're very proud of our website, and we have lots of discounts with our partners that we can offer schools when they decide to join us and become a member. And you can see some examples on screen there. So we have publishing companies like Brown's Books for Students. We can offer a pretty reasonable discount. We offer discounts on particular educational magazines, popular publications like Teach Primary, Teach Secondary, First News, etc. One of the aspects of our work that we're also extremely proud of is our own research team. We have an in-house research team who produce many, many useful and informative research reports for us on an annual basis. And another element of their work is to run our annual literacy survey. This is a really key piece of work that we do year after year, and it helps us to measure students and young people's attitudes to their reading, writing and speaking and listening. So it's really about understanding pupils' attitudes and behaviours. And what we find is schools who work with us on an annual basis and carry out this survey regularly, they're obviously building up a picture of their own practice in school and how students' attitudes are changing through doing this survey on a regular basis. So I've put the link on screen there for you. All my links in the slides are highlighted in blue for you to make it easy for you to go away and follow these links after the training today. As you can see, what we do is when schools have come to us and participated in that survey, and you can enter as a small number of pupils, or you could enter the whole school if you wanted to, it's entirely up to you. We then create a bespoke report for each school, giving them the key messages about what your pupils have said about their whole attitudes and behaviours around their literacy in schools. Another document that is locked behind our membership wall, but one we're very proud of, is our annually updated research and policy guide. And this is a key document for our members and for teachers across the country. It helps you to drill down into the best areas to go to for that evidence-based practice, making links with the absolute up-to-the-minute information about what's out there, what can we rely on as a body of evidence, as a body of support for our thinking in a particular area. So we organise it around aspects of literacy. For example, you could turn to the Reading for Enjoyment section and look at some of the latest thinking and latest research in that area. I'll put on screen here for you a selection of our research reports. Yet again, you can see the link directly to that area on our website for you. And here you can see 3 particular research reports carried out fairly recently between sort of 2020 and 2021. You can see the first one is a response around writing, and that was particularly influenced by our research during the pandemic as well, and how sort of writing was compromised because of the shutdowns and the online teaching, and how children felt about their writing as a result. Interesting piece of new research we've carried out looking at some of our reluctant girl readers, because of course we've had a long running discussion and dialogue about boys and literacy over the years, and boys with writing, boys with reading, but of course we're interested in both genders, you know, and obviously we want to look at what's going on across our communities in schools. So this is a very interesting recent piece of research about some of the girls who are reluctant readers and what we can do to support them and what would bring them back to reading as they progress up to those older ages in secondary as well. And then, of course, the final piece, looking at the role of audiobooks. We've done lots of work around using podcasts and audio in schools to support reading for pleasure, to support reading development, reading for learning. So again, if you're interested in that area, that would be a good starting point for your school community. So I suppose what I'm really trying to flag here with you is that, as well as the body of evidence that exists more widely for all of us to tap into, we have research and evidence that you can look at, particularly if you've identified a very particular area of literacy for your school community that you want to work on. Do look at our body of research first and see if there's some evidence there that you can tap into when you're talking to staff in school, talking to teachers about why you've made that choice about that particular priority. So obviously what I've flagged for here on screen with you are a number of areas that we're finding are proving very popular with schools at the moment in terms of the work they're doing. So schools who've started to look at disciplinary literacy as a priority, schools who are working on vocabulary development and direct, robust instruction around vocabulary, schools looking at the whole journey between learning to read and reading to learn and the building of comprehension skills. That whole ongoing venture into reading for pleasure and trying to find out about the best ways to improve the culture of reading in schools. A project of perhaps around developing whole school writing. You know, English departments often do lots of really powerful work on writing development, and of course it's a key element of the English curriculum. But there is a need to look at how writing is taught in secondaries more across subjects and think about that disciplinary angle and how other subject areas not only deliver content, but support students to shape and structure the writing of that content. And then, of course, we drill down into subjects, and there's just a selection on screen there about subjects we could offer. Literacy in English, in history, geography, science, mathematics. So we're really proud of these subject-specific areas of our training. Then we're not forgetting all of you who have the responsibility for leading literacy in your school communities. So we have a number of resources on our website and indeed a bespoke piece of training for those who are starting out on their journey as whole school literacy leaders, particularly, of course, early careers teachers who might want to go down this road and are thinking about this as a future. They might go on to do a national professional qualification, an NPQ, and of course the United Kingdom is just about to launch in September 2022 the new NPQ for literacy. So we're sort of aligning some of our leading literacy resources with that national professional qualification as well. So certainly that's more targeted towards people working at that middle leader towards senior leadership level. Wanted to ensure that you're very aware how importantly we take the work of the Education Endowment Foundation, that there's a strand running through all of our training where we align our training and our advice around classroom pedagogy with the work of the EEF, the Education Endowment Foundation. We're very keen to utilise their very powerful and effective report, Improving Literacy in Secondary Schools, and we make sure that we identify the strands that we're working on with our different courses. So of course, those of you who are familiar with this document, it was published in July 2019, will be aware of the 7 strands and how each strand covers a very specific area of literacy development. And you can see I've enlarged strands 1, 2 and 3 there. So of course, you will note the first strand being around disciplinary literacy. And of course, that's an excellent starting point for schools who are thinking about the direction of strategic planning in schools now, moving away from perhaps the old language about literacy across the curriculum, which implied lots of whole school work, which wasn't so subject specific, has a place still. However, the work that goes on in our classrooms really benefits from having that disciplinary literacy lens, and that's what we try to do in all of our training, is to support teachers to think like a geographer, to speak like a historian, to read like a mathematician, etc. So we're really thinking about those subject-based approaches in our literacy work. If you went onto our website and looked at our training, you will see our secondary training is organised around pathways, which we think is the most useful way to communicate with schools about how they might take on our training. And I'm flagging two particular pathways with you on this screen here. You can see I've got my first pathway, introducing disciplinary literacy. And we might recommend to schools that if they're sort of at a starting point where they want to revisit their approach, and I'm certainly not for 1 minute arguing that schools haven't been thinking about literacy for a very a large number of years. However, if there's a need to inject a bit of new life into it, to reapproach, to think differently about the way it's been done before, and to think with this disciplinary literacy hat on, this might be a pathway for your school. And you can see what we've tried to do is gather the most pertinent modules of our CPD into these pathways. So if you took the disciplinary literacy pathway, we would recommend our 90-minute session, what is disciplinary literacy for the whole school. And then you might look at perhaps moving that into disciplinary reading. And we would offer our part 1 and part 2 of our reading for learning to support disciplinary reading and reading comprehension. And then we take that further in the UK with our work around supporting disciplinary literacy for GCSE exams. And then if you look at the literacy in English pathway, we have our subject-specific developing literacy in English. Now, this is not about supporting the development of the English curriculum, because we know that you can all do that. You can do that very well for yourselves. You get your support from your exam boards. This is literally about looking at those strategies that will support the reading and the writing and the talk in the subject of English. And again, we would recommend that course particularly for some early careers professionals who are starting out on their journey as English teachers. We then move into a piece on developing narrative and descriptive writing in English. That's a 3-part session, each session lasting an hour, and really wonderful piece of training written and led by a Booker-nominated author, Will Manure, and he's been working with us on this and developing this, particularly again to bring it in line with the expectations at Key Stage 4 for our students at that end of their educational journey. And then the last element I wrote myself, the reading for pleasure, parts 1 and 2. And this, of course, has a whole school perspective, but often is driven by members of the English department as a starting point. And certainly we're very proud of this in terms of it moving the conversation around reading for pleasure more widely away from simply print books and print material into thinking about reading for pleasure online and digital resources, and how we can help to really engage students around the concept of reading for pleasure for them now, and how they use screens and how they read on screens and how they access their own personal reading, non-fiction, fiction, their reading of websites, their blogs, their interaction with social media, etc. So I wanted to just share with you a brief overview of what sort of costs are involved when you as a school apply to us and want to book some training with us. We have a modular cost of £550 for a whole school session at 90 minutes. So these are costs on screen now for you joining as a whole school and us delivering online training with you for your whole school community. And then, as you can see, if you were to book our part 1 and part 2 courses, you would be buying 2 90-minute sessions for those courses. So it just gives you a sense of pricing. What I want to say is, throughout the year, we put on what we call ticketed events. So all of our training, we run a schedule throughout the year where anybody can simply log on and book themselves onto those ticketed events. They're always run UK time after school, so it may be slightly trickier for some of you to access these. I don't know quite how that works for you, but we do record sessions as well. We can do that as well and share them with people. But those ticketed events are at a cost of £110 for the person to log on as an individual ticket price. So you can just come as an individual, say that's something I'd like to do. That's going to be my CPD for this term, and I'm going to book myself onto that particular training session. So you can buy individual training, or you can buy training for your whole school community. And of course, the other thing we can do to reduce costs is if schools want to partner together and club together and think, well, actually, we've got sort of 2 or 3 maths departments who'd like to purchase the maths training, then obviously we can do a bespoke price for those 3 or 4 schools to work together and the maths departments to work together for a particular piece, in this case, our literacy for mathematics parts 1 and 2. For members, as I said, we have a range of rich resources. We have free resources for non-members, but if you want to access the full range of our resources, you would need to be a member. And here's just a flavour of some of the recent pieces that we've been creating for our website. You can see they're very varied. So again, as alongside the training, we create resources that sit with our training. So if you were doing our disciplinary literacy training, you'd probably want to go on and look at the partner resources that go with that training. You can see there, we've actually put some resources up specifically to support physical education teachers and PE departments. And we've also done a piece of work around multimodal literacy and reading and viewing in particular subjects. And in this case, we have 3 versions, a version written for the English department, a version for the history department, and a version for the design technology department. So we're constantly trying to create resources that target specific subjects. And I wanted to bring my session to an end. I know I need to finish shortly, just to flag up that very shortly, it's coming very soon, as you can see from the date on screen, we are running one of our secondary school online conferences. We ran our first one last year, and we've since won a bespoke STEM one as well in the summer. So this is our 3rd conference that we've run online. We're very excited about it. As you can see, we're aligning ourselves with National Storytelling Week. So we're taking the kind of sense of changing and change through narrative and leveling up through literacy, but using that focus of changing the narrative, changing the story, driving change through the way we communicate with each other, and using that as a vehicle for our conference. Some of you may be familiar with the author and educationist Alex Quigley. We're very delighted that Alex Quigley and his colleague Sarah Green from the Education Endowment Foundation will be offering us a keynote speech. So they will kick off our conference on Monday, the 31st of January. You can see on screen that should you wish to purchase a ticket, yet again, I think it's pretty reasonable. You can buy a £60 ticket for your school community, and it means that everybody in your school community can log on to whichever sessions they feel like. You'll get the timetable of events once you've purchased your ticket, and you can log on and suggest to people that they attend different sessions throughout the 4-day conference. We have both teacher-facing and pupil-facing sessions. And some of the pupil-facing sessions, you can obviously, if they work with your timing, you could have them live in your classrooms. Just as, again, everything is being recorded. So if you purchase the ticket and the timings don't work for you, you can obviously then show those sessions to your students or to members of your staff at the time that is appropriate for you to log on and watch these sessions. If you would like any further information following this brief webinar from me this morning, do get in touch. You can see my name is Fiona Oakley, so I'm the second link on the screen there. I'm the Secondary School Advisors, as Susie said at the start of the session. You're very welcome to email me directly. My colleague Nisha Tank, who's our Programme Manager, wished me to communicate that she's really delighted if anybody wants to get in touch, and particularly to talk about whole school training. So you have those links now. And that brings me to the end of the session. So I'm going to stop sharing the slides now and pass back to Susie. Thank you, Susie.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Please don't forget, everybody, that you can post questions in the chat. Please go ahead if there's anything you would like to post there.
I can see that Kat has asked if it's £60 for all 4 days. Yes, Kat, that is £60 on the conference for all 4 days, and as many people in your school logging on as you would like.
And before you answer any more questions, Fiona, I would like to thank you further. I want to thank you for introducing us to the fantastic Literacy Trust UK. Surprisingly, not everybody will be familiar with it, along with sharing with us the highlights of your website, and also informing us about the distinct 3-part model that the organisation uses. You've also shared with us how the organisation provides bespoke training and consultancy for schools all over the world. And the work that is done by the National Literacy Trust helps schools to make systematic change happen, change that is sustained and manageable. We've all been in situations where great initiatives start and then they just flounder. And so it was very exciting to hear about, how the organisation can help schools to make sure that initiatives are sustained. The organisation backs up training with the provision of support materials that can help schools to make this change happen. The National Literacy Trust gives advice that can be trusted. The strategies and tools provided by the organisation is based on robust research findings, both its own research and on the work of very credible organisations like the EEF. This research-based approach, along with the huge repertoire of talented leadership, expertise, Fiona being one example, and support on offer, makes membership of the National Literacy Trust an extremely attractive option for schools that want to raise standards across the board. As we all know, strengthening literacy skills is a sure way to raise standards in all subjects. So thank you, Fiona, for inspiring English teachers and literacy leaders to adopt a subject-based approach and to consider viewing literacy through a subject-specific lens as we consider the benefits of a more disciplinary literacy approach, which some of us may not have considered before. And obviously by attending your training sessions, strategies for that will be shared with participants. I myself have attended a training conference at the National Literacy Trust main offices in London, and I'd like to take this opportunity to share with you all that it was seriously one of the very best training experiences that I have ever had throughout my career, both in the UK and internationally. And
you're absolutely welcome. And just to reiterate, if anybody, I know sometimes it's quite hard to think on the spot. So if anybody goes away and has any questions, please do use the email contact I've given you. Really, really happy to follow up any queries or questions after the event.
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
Okay.
And we will now move on to our second presenter, Anne Wassell. Welcome, Anne.
Hello, everybody.
Anne has worked in education for over 25 years across a range of sectors from nursery to sixth form and in roles such as Vice Principal, Director of Studies and SENCO. Her career has also been interspersed with experience in business, and she is now the Director of the highly successful Lexonic organisation. Lexonic is an esteemed UK-based organisation that helps teachers to raise attainment through transformational literacy programmes and provides teacher training to supercharge reading, spelling and vocabulary. You can find Lexonic on social media. I myself am a keen follower and I really enjoy their tweets on their Twitter page, which is called Literacy at the Speed of Sound. And the handle for the Twitter page for Lexonic is @Lexonic STF follows you. I shall post the handle into the chat bar in a moment so that you can pick up on that. Anne uses her previous experience to monitor and develop quality and training processes and activity, which are paramount to the consistency, success, and continuing growth of the Lexonic organisation. The presentation today will share with us systematic approaches to the explicit teaching of vocabulary, research-based teaching techniques, and explore how to put vocabulary at the heart of the curriculum. Thank you very much, Anne. Excuse my faltering.
No problem. I shall try.
At the end of a lesson,
Yeah,
as they transition, I think I should mute myself and hand over to you immediately.
The business of school continues, regardless.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Anne. Over to you.
I'll try to share my screen here. Hopefully this works. Oh, there we go. Just move it into slide format. So hopefully you can all see that. Just a thumbs up would be great, Susie. Thank you very much. Thank you. Before I get started really with the explicit teaching of vocabulary itself, I just want to share with you what the important pillars that are needed. Oh, sorry, I don't quite know what happened there. The important pillars that are needed towards reading success. And these can be, don't quite know why that's not showing. Apologies. That's probably because it's at the, just start again. It's not as if I didn't have at least 20 minutes to to sort this out, is it? So the 5 pillars of reading, just exploring this, because all these 5 pillars are needed for a successful academic reader, starting with phonological awareness and that identification and manipulation of units of language and sound. And this arguably could happen before birth, but certainly once a child is born, they're starting to be soaked in that language that is enveloping them. And we would hope that there is that rich language at home, and therefore this phonological awareness becomes a secure pillar. However, there are students that will miss out on large chunks of this very first pillar, and it might need to be revisited at a later date. And that's true also of phonics instruction. The phonics programs within schools at the primary level and early years level, they deal with that the letter correspondence, working towards the grapheme correspondence for the foundations of writing, and associating sounds with letters, and that is the sounds of the letters, not the names of the letters, and this is obviously very, very important as a foundation towards reading and reading as a whole. However, some students do get stuck at this stage and do need intervention later on in their educational career to be able to move them on. And some of the lexonic programs cater to that very, very well, and we pride ourselves on being age appropriate for that, and not in a way patronizing to the students in any way. But moving on from there, if you've got those 2 first foundation pillars in place, then it moves to fluency and fluency instruction, and this is about the speed and accuracy of reading and that expression of reading. And this is where it's important that a teacher reads to a class, so that there is modeling going on, that they can hear the reading and they can follow the reading, and they can start to build up some sort of automaticity where reading is concerned, which it moves it away from the mechanics of reading and building the foundations of comprehension, which brings us to pillar 4 and the vocabulary instruction, which I'm going to be dealing with in this presentation today, dealing with morphemic analysis and looking at the component parts of a word and how they're important, building up the meaning of a whole word. And finally, we get to that golden place of comprehension, and we hope to have metacognitive students who have strategic and independent means of reading, that are becoming critical readers, critical thinkers, and then ultimately critical learners. So what's the problem here? I want to just illustrate this slightly for you by asking you to imagine that you're a cover teacher and you've walked into a lesson and you've been presented with this list of words. How are you going to go about teaching the list of words here? Now, these words you'll be familiar with, you'll know the definitions of these words, but you move into your second cover lesson and you're presented with this word. And this illustrates that a student who comes across a word for the first time and hasn't heard the word, just sees the word written, the difficulty that they might have. Now, don't worry, this is not a real word, but we will return to this towards the end of the presentation, because it does illustrate why the explicit teaching of vocabulary is important. And why is it important? Now, the government back in 2018-19, they announced and recommended that the word count within endpoint assessments was increased. And indeed, as illustrated by this table, it did increase quite significantly. And this wasn't just at the primary level, but also at GCSE level. Those endpoint assessments also increased in their word count. Not only increasing in their word count, but actually also increasing in the complexity of that vocabulary, dealing with that tier 2 and tier 3 vocabulary much more. And it was estimated that across those endpoint assessments, for a student to perform well, they had to know in the region of 80,000 words. That's quite considerable vocabulary count, as you can imagine. So we did have to address this. And I know that obviously endpoint assessments have been on pause for a little while. However, we're bound to return to them in whatever form. So the word count isn't going to go away. We will need to have a way of explicitly teaching the vocabulary. So what we needed to do was to empower students and give them an independence with their vocabulary exploration, and a good diagram and illustration of learning around this from Guy Claxton and James Nottingham illustrates that in order to learn, you need to be thrown into that pit and be challenged at the bottom of that learning pit, and it's only through the struggle that learning occurs, and to be able to construct your way out of that pit, then you need clear instruction, clear guidance, but you do need that challenge to be able to move on. And alongside that, we have to look at the cognitive load theory, the theory being that the working memory is finite, and therefore to overload the working memory means that a student can't take in any more content, can't take in any more knowledge. So we need a way of being able to move knowledge from the working memory into the long-term memory, building neuro pathways, and so that the student can obtain and retain and have good memory recall. So in order to progress along these ways, we need a systematic approach across the school that starts to lessen that vocabulary gap, and addresses and lessens teacher variability across the school. So on those lines, we've got a question. What are you going to do when you don't know what to do? And we want the answer to be from our colleagues and from our students to be, use what you know to access what you don't know. In order to acquire vocabulary knowledge, this might be incidentally through conversation and social interaction, but also in the classroom. But we're addressing it in the classroom and across the school. We must remember the vocabulary must be explicitly taught. We can't leave it to osmosis or chance. It really does need to have an explicit approach to it. So I'm going to share with you here a simple sort of game that helps to explore vocabulary that can be done with colleagues or with students alike. There's quite a lot here, so I'm going to sort of whiz through it, but it will give you an illustration of the sort of thing that can be done to explore vocabulary. I mentioned morphemic analysis in that pillar 4, and morphemic analysis is the looking at the component parts of a word, so the prefix, the stem and the suffix, which hold meaning, and looking at the meaning of those component parts, building them up, and then creating the meaning for the whole word. So here we've got a list of prefixes on the left-hand side and their definitions on the right-hand side, and you are to match each with each. So taking an example of X, then how do we know what that means? When you're considering that prefix, where's your mind going? What words are you thinking of? Well, I might be thinking of the word exit. Well, when I exit a room, I go out of the room. So therefore we've got a clue that X would mean out. We've got con. You might notice here that some of the prefixes have got multiple definitions, so we do need to be wary of that and be sightful of that. Try has got one definition, try for 3, as in triangle, literally 3 angles, or tripod, or triathlon, and you can see that my mind is going to words that I consider with that prefix try, and I'm building up my word count and my understanding of those definitions by, to, and omni, or. As I said, I'm just going to whiz through these, but suffixes also hold meaning, a little bit more complicated, but they are important to know. So a popular one, Shon, can be spelled S-I-O-N as well as T-I-O-N, does mean the same thing, the act or process or result of something. Ology, I always think of a comedian saying, I've got an ology, being proud of an academic achievement. Ology meaning the study of, as in criminology or sociology or biology. Ment is another popular suffix, and aside, one of my favorites, don't quite know what it says about me, one of my favorites, denoting the killer or killing. So we can also build up those understanding of the prefix and suffixes and their definitions and relate them to numerous words. So here we've got those prefixes with a raft of words that contain those prefixes, which starts as being able to build up the meaning to those words. And similarly with the suffixes, and you can see that actually from just studying 2 or 3 prefixes, 2 or 3 suffixes, we're actually building up quite a bank of vocabulary, building up to those 80,000 words that the student needs. Now, the explicit vocabulary instruction, how can we build up a systematic approach to this that can be copied and repeated across disciplines, so that when a discipline is looking at its own vocabulary, they have a method to be able to explore that. So let's have a look at that from a practical point of view. The word extraction has a prefix, a stem, and a suffix. What does extraction mean? So first we need to break it down into its component parts, and then analyze each component part. So X, what does X mean? Now, we already looked at exit, meaning out of the room, going out of the room. But let me just check that. Let me check that with another word that I might know, like export. Port meaning to carry. So to export literally means to carry out, typically out of a country, we think of. Track, stem, this stem, track. Where's my mind going with that? What do I already know that I can access to help me understand what track means? Well, I think of tractor. What does a tractor do? A tractor pulls or drags. So track means to pull or drag. Sean, we've already touched on this with our exploration of suffixes. And Sean means the act or process or result of, can be spelt S-O-I-O-N or T-I-O-N. So watch out for the meaning there. So once we've done that and we've extracted the meaning of each component part of the word, we can pull it together and say that extraction is the act or process of pulling or dragging something out of somewhere. So I think of the extraction of a tooth at the dentist, for example. So that's the word extraction. Now, it's important to challenge and repeat. So we've looked at extraction, but let's not look at it in isolation. Let's actually challenge and repeat ourselves and check ourselves. This is very important in terms of building up those neuro pathways. So you're creating the neuro pathway with the methodology that we were using with extraction, and then you need to repeat it in a format so that you are actually strengthening those neuro pathways. An example of this might be, in practical terms, driving a car. My instructor was very, very skilled, and he gave me explicit instruction in driving a car, left nothing to chance or osmosis. Could possibly have been quite dangerous if he had done. And each lesson he would challenge me, throw me into that learning pit, and I had to struggle my way out. I was learning a new skill. I couldn't focus on anything else. I couldn't concentrate on anything else. I had to concentrate on the challenge at hand. However, the next lesson, he would repeat that and repeat the practice of that, and then layer another challenge on top. And eventually, because of that challenge and repeat and the gap between the learning episodes once a week, I was actually moving my skill and my knowledge into my long-term memory from that working memory. And therefore now I can drive a car and I don't have to think about the mechanics of driving it. I don't have to think about driving it. I can actually use my working memory to think about other things like planning my next lesson, for example. So let's do that. So we've looked at extraction. Let's look at subtraction. Now, we already know that when we've broken it up into its component parts of prefix, stem, and suffix, that Sean aims the act or process of, track means to pull or to drag. So let's look at sub. What might sub mean? Where's my mind going? What am I thinking about? Subway, under the road. Submarine, under the water. So if that means under or below or beneath, then the whole word, the actual process, a result of dragging something under or below or beneath. And you can see the connection in maths as to how we've got the definition of subtraction in a mathematical way. Track, I mentioned there the stem. We looked at prefixes and we looked at suffixes. Stems are equally important. What does it mean and how do you know? Now, I mentioned tractor, and very helpfully there's a picture of a tractor on this slide. However, please be careful of picture clues. We don't want to be stuck on those. The student will just remember that picture clue as a tractor and associate track with tractor, but we actually want to explore what else can we find that stem in, what are the other connections. Don't teach the word in isolation. So you can see there are a number of words here that have that track stem in them, and if we know what track means, that helps us to define those other words. And again, because we're not teaching in isolation, we're building up quite rapidly that word count. STEM, as indeed prefixes, can be cross-curricular in their meaning. So try, as I mentioned earlier, triangle in maths, tripod in science, triathlon in physical education, meaning three disciplines. So there are connections that can be made there, but what's important is that we do have a systematic way, and a way that is replicable across numerous subject areas, that the student recognizes as a method that they can tackle vocabulary in different disciplines. So we've looked at what's successful, what's not so successful, and we just need to be wary of, and I'm going to whiz through this. Be careful of using dictionaries. You've got one definition, you're looking at one word in isolation, the definition might not fit into the context that you're using it within. Be careful of not using too many words at once, or tackling too many words at once. About 6 words at a time is usually good, but that's the count that we use within Lexonic Vocabulary, which is an online tool that can be used in schools for vocabulary instruction. Be careful not to give lists of vocabulary, or even to display vocabulary around the room without it being interactive, without you doing that deep processing and using the methodology to analyze the vocabulary, because otherwise it just becomes wallpaper. It isn't interactive with the student. Be careful of things like silent reading sessions. When you're in silent reading sessions, are you sure that the student is reading? Are they stuck at that mechanical reading stage and therefore not developing the comprehension, not having the speed to be able to develop comprehension? Remember, automaticity is really important in increasing that speed and therefore increasing the comprehension levels, which are really important for those higher pillars. So just do those checks, just do the checks that the things that perhaps might be popular are not so successful, that you are addressing vocabulary in a systematic approach using multiple exposure. You might have noticed that I said extraction and subtraction, to distraction, oh, there's another track word, isn't there? To distraction, by saying it and numerous times, but it is important that that is done. So you need to say, write and say again, and then unpick it. So use that morphemic analysis and that methodology to unpick the word, look at its component parts, look at the definitions of those component parts with a prefix, stem and suffix, and build up the meaning of the whole word, and making those connections with other words. What do we already know that we can access to help us define, and then repeat that process again. So that's an easy methodology that can be used across the school in whatever lesson in front of any vocabulary. And then, as we said, challenge and repeat, that's very important for moving the knowledge into long-term memory, so that we can move the learning on. So with that in mind, we'll go back to have a look at this word at the beginning of the presentation. And as I said, it's not as far as I know, not a real word. Ex-activationist. Now, here we break this up into its component parts, and we've got a prefix, we've got a stem, we've got actually 2 suffixes here. So we've got the shon, which we already know means the actual process of. Is means a person. Ex, we know, means out, and we explored that with exit and export. There are other words that we can check that with, like extraterrestrial, for example. Activa means active, to be active or motivated. So if we put all that together, we've got a person in the actual process of activating outside. So perhaps with exoactivationist, we can rename our physical education teachers as exoactivationists. So what you're going to do when you don't know what to do? What can the student do when they don't know what to do? When they're faced with a word they've never seen before, like exoactivationists, they need to use what they already know to access what they don't. So you're encouraging them to use a methodology to explore, well, okay, in the case of X, what other words do I know with X? What can I explore to give me a chance of understanding that word? So in summary, we don't want to teach words in isolation. We want to make those connections. We want to use a methodology, namely morphemic analysis, to be able to break those words up and use the component parts to help us build them back up again and give definitions to those words. And we want to demonstrate a model, a way of thinking and a way of exploring the words and making the students word conscious and making them very word active. So thank you for listening to me. If you want to hear more about Lexonic, then please visit our website at www.lexonic.co.uk, or you can contact me direct at anne.wassell@lexonic.co.uk. Thank you. Over to you, Susie.
Thank you very, very much, Anne, for sharing your expertise with us and for your inspiring presentation. You have shared some excellent advice on how we might empower our students by challenging them and by giving them the confidence to struggle and to take risks, consolidating learning as they build learning pathways in order to succeed on their journeys. You've shared with us some wonderful ideas and strategies for engaging in morphemic analysis in order to nourish the memory and ultimately to expand vocabulary and by default then expand written and spoken expression. The strategies that you share are strongly based on research findings that prove their efficacy and that give us the confidence to listen and to trust your advice and to take these strategies and hopefully others that we will explore via the Lexonic pathway into the classroom. Anne has reminded us that although we may be tempted to teach words as separate entities, it's important to consider the interconnectedness of words and the related concepts and themes across subjects. And Anne has highlighted for us again how important it is to apply careful strategies that can help our pupils to succeed. Thank you very much, Anne and Lexonic, for your time and your contributions and for the support that you've extended to BSME English teachers. Do we have any questions for Anne, please? You may either raise your hand or unmute yourself and speak up or post your question in the chat bar. While we're doing that, I'll just make sure that I share the Twitter handle I promised to share. Are we? Let's see. Questions? Okie dokie. You answered all the questions already, Anne, in your presentation, it seems.
Well, it was a bit of a whirlwind. So, apologies for that. I sort of raced through it. So if anybody wants to contact me direct, then please feel free.
Thank you so much. And on that note, we will be closing now. Please remember to share this webinar with your colleagues at school. The recorded version will be available early next week on the Secondary English Network page. As BSME members, you are also eligible to watch any of the webinars in any of the networks, for example, general teaching and learning webinars, leadership matters, or safeguarding. Please do take a look at the webinars on offer on the website. And for your information, our next webinar will take place on the 19th of March 2022. To be confirmed, dates have been shared with schools and will be shared again, and will be entitled The Aura-C Hub Implementation and Impact. This will be led by Sarah Lambert, an experienced teacher of English and English literature. Sarah is a specialist leader in education at Dubai College. She focuses a lot of her work on using the Harkness model method of learning through discussion. Sarah is passionate about the transformative power of classroom talk and has created the Dubai Oracy Hub, which is promoting Oracy throughout the region. Please join us then. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye for now.